Imagine working quietly in the background, watching everything unfold around you, while no one ever sees your true potential. Clara Davies spent 15 years doing just that, cleaning offices, sweeping floors, and taking out the trash in a bustling corporation. To most, she was invisible, just another part of the building's routine. But beneath the surface, Clara held a secret, a sharp mind, a past life as a financial analyst, and an eye for details that most executives missed. As she quietly went about her duties, Clara began noticing troubling patterns in the company's finances, something no one else seemed to see. The empire around her was on the edge of collapse, and no one had a clue, except her. Join us as we unravel the incredible story of how an ordinary cleaning lady changed the fate of a corporation and proved that strength, wisdom, and courage can come from the most unexpected places. Before we dive into this gripping tale of resilience and hidden strength, comment below where you're watching from today. And if you enjoy this inspiring story of unexpected courage, don't forget to subscribe for more. Clara Davies had been working at a major corporation in the city for the past 15 years. Every day her role was to make sure that every surface sparkled and that each office space looked as good as new by the time the employees arrived. It was a routine that never changed. Sweeping the floors, emptying trash cans, wiping down desks, and polishing glass windows. Clara was the first to arrive each morning and the last to leave every night, ensuring her duties were fulfilled meticulously. To most of her colleagues, Clara was simply the cleaning lady. She was a familiar face in the building, but never truly noticed or acknowledged. To them, she was like the furniture or the decor, part of the backdrop they walked by each day without a second thought. Her presence was steady and reliable, but she was practically invisible to them. Even the executives, with whom she frequently crossed paths as they moved around the building in their suits and focused expressions, barely recognized her existence. Clara, to them, was simply part of the scenery, a necessary role in the background, there only to keep the space they worked in tidy. No one ever asked Clara about her life, her dreams, or her past. It was as though they saw no need to look beyond the uniform she wore. Perhaps on a particularly cordial day, someone might nod in her direction or utter a quick good morning. But a real conversation, acknowledgement that she was part of their world, that was rare, if not entirely absent. Yet Clara's role as a cleaning lady didn't define her fully. Beneath the routine and quiet exterior, Clara was deeply observant. Each day, as she cleaned, she absorbed details that most would overlook. Working late into the evenings, after everyone had gone home, Clara had a unique perspective on the company's inner workings. Many assumed she was oblivious to the conversations she overheard, or that she wouldn't understand the topics being discussed. But Clara understood a lot more than they realized. In fact, during her years there, Clara had picked up more than most of her colleagues would have guessed. Executives might discuss financial decisions, promotions, and upcoming changes in the business while passing by her or chatting in boardrooms late at night. The assumption, of course, was that Clara was not listening, or if she was, that she wouldn't comprehend their conversations. But Clara was alert. Every remark, every half-finished sentence, every snippet of conversation about the business, all these pieces of information were like parts of a puzzle, and Clara was quietly piecing them together. Over time, Clara gained an understanding of the company's operations that went far beyond her job description. She knew the employees' management structure and even caught hints of confidential matters discussed behind closed doors. In a way, Clara had developed a comprehensive grasp of the company's internal dynamics, both the positive and the problematic. Her mind was sharp, and she had a talent for noticing the small details that could easily go overlooked by those who saw her as just the help. While she wiped down desks and scrubbed floors, her mind was never idle. Cleaning was a repetitive task, but it gave her time to think. Clara often pondered over the decisions the executives made, wondering what factors had led to their choices and how those choices might affect the employees or the company itself. No one ever asked for her perspective. Of course, it wouldn't occur to them that Clara might have insights into the way the company functioned. For most of them, Clara's job title was all they needed to know about her. But Clara took pride in her work. Despite being overlooked and taken for granted, she had her own sense of self-worth. Clara's background had instilled in her a strong work ethic, and she knew that her role contributed to her family's well-being. She didn't need validation from the executives or the employees who barely looked her way. However, she couldn't help but notice the way people treated her. Many seemed to think that because she wore a cleaning uniform, she wasn't capable of anything else. What they didn't know was that Clara's past held a story they'd never expected. Years ago, Clara had been in the corporate world herself, working as a financial analyst at a smaller firm. She had spent years studying numbers, analyzing trends, and making important decisions. But life had thrown her a curveball, and a personal tragedy had forced her to step away from her promising career. She needed a stable job with reliable hours and immediate pay, and cleaning was the only work she could find at the time. Although it was a step away from her dreams, Clara approached it with the same determination she'd brought to her past career. While her role had changed, her sharp mind hadn't. Clara still kept up with the finance world in her spare time, reading articles and following market trends. She knew that knowledge was powerful, even if she no longer had the title or the office to match her capabilities. Over the years, Clara had developed a quiet acceptance of her situation, though she never truly left behind the analytical side of herself. As Clara overheard certain conversations about the company's finances, her interest was piqued. Her observant nature and keen eye allowed her to spot things others missed, such as financial reports left carelessly on desks or strategic charts on whiteboards. Clara noticed patterns that began to make her suspicious. The numbers didn't quite add up, and something about the way the company was being run felt wrong. Of course, Clara was in no position to speak up. After all, she was just the cleaning lady. Who would listen to her, even if she did bring up her concerns? However, as the weeks went by, Clara continued to notice discrepancies that troubled her. To everyone else, she remained invisible, going about her tasks without comment. However, Clara was beginning to realize that she might be the only one who understood the real challenges facing the company. The Clara that most people knew was quiet and unassuming, someone who went about her cleaning duties without a fuss. But Clara's life held a backstory that few could have imagined. Before circumstances forced her to take up this job, Clara had been on a completely different path. She had once been a skilled financial analyst at a smaller, rapidly growing firm. Her days had been filled with numbers and strategies, analyzing financial data, and predicting market trends. Clara had been good at it too, so good that her colleagues often sought her advice on complex financial issues. It had taken years of study and a sharp mind to get there. Clara had been respected for her ability to detect patterns and solve complex financial puzzles that often eluded others. Her former life was a testament to her intelligence and ambition. She'd been on her way to a successful career when, as life sometimes does, things took an unexpected turn. Family circumstances had intervened, hitting her hard. A family tragedy forced her to make a choice she'd never anticipated. In order to support her loved ones, Clara left behind her promising career and began looking for work that would allow her to provide for her family immediately. The only job she found that offered steady hours and a reliable paycheck was cleaning. She took it without hesitation. Family had always come first for her, and Clara wasn't one to shy away from hard work. While it hadn't been her dream job, Clara had approached it with the same discipline and pride she had always shown. Every task, whether it was mopping floors or emptying trash, was done with meticulous care. She valued her role, knowing that it allowed her to care for her family, and she carried that sense of duty every day. However, while her job changed, Clara's sharp mind didn't. The analytical skills she'd once used in boardrooms didn't simply disappear. When Clara finished her shifts, she would often spend her free time reading financial reports, skimming through market trends, and staying informed on industry news. Her mind stayed active and engaged, and her knowledge remained sharp. She knew that understanding the language of finance was powerful, and although her career had taken a different direction, she kept her skills alive in her own way. This unusual combination, an analytical mind with a job that gave her access to so many company spaces, put Clara in a unique position. While the employees around her assumed she was unaware of their discussions and documents, Clara quietly observed everything. In fact, she was probably more aware of the company's inner workings than many of her coworkers. She saw things they didn't see, mainly because they were so accustomed to overlooking her. This, ironically, made Clara the most perceptive person in the building. One day, while dusting the office of a junior manager, Clara noticed a financial report carelessly left open on the desk. Glancing at it, she saw figures that immediately caught her attention. The revenue numbers didn't align with some expense projections she had previously spotted on another desk. The discrepancy was subtle, but enough to make Clara pause. To an untrained eye, it might have looked like a simple mistake. But for Clara, who had once spent her days analyzing financial documents, this looked more like a red flag. In the following weeks, Clara noticed similar inconsistencies in other documents left lying around. She couldn't help but pay closer attention. Some employees were surprisingly careless with sensitive materials, leaving quarterly financial reports out in the open, taped notes with key figures posted on whiteboards, and even strategic planning documents strewn across desks. Clara soaked it all in, her mind piecing together bits of information that, alone, might have seemed meaningless, but collectively began to reveal a troubling picture. It was during this time that Clara remembered one particularly worrisome document she'd seen in the office of the chief financial officer, Marcus Gale. She'd glanced at the report briefly while cleaning, but it had been enough to notice that the financial projections for the upcoming quarter were unusually optimistic, given the current economic climate. Something didn't add up. What Clara was seeing wasn't just sloppy bookkeeping. It was a potential crisis in the making. Funds were being allocated in ways that made little sense, and expenses appeared to be piling up faster than the company could handle. The deeper she looked, the clearer it became to her that the company was on a path to financial trouble, a path no one else seemed to be acknowledging. And what concerned Clara most was the thought that, if she was right, the fallout would be devastating. Hundreds of employees, people with families, and people who depended on their jobs could lose everything if the company went under. Despite the mounting evidence she was seeing, Clara knew there was no way she could simply walk into an executive's office and share her concerns. Who would take her seriously? To them, she was the cleaning lady. She doubted anyone in the building would even give her a chance to speak, let alone consider her perspective on the finances. And yet, she couldn't bring herself to ignore what she was seeing. Clara realized that, if things continued as they were, the company might be facing a disaster. And she, strangely enough, was the only one who seemed aware of it. Silently, Clara began to keep track of the information she was gathering. She took mental notes, recording the discrepancies she saw and comparing them to past documents she remembered. It was a strange position to be in. Clara, the cleaning lady, was quietly piecing together the company's financial issues in a way no one else seemed to be noticing. Every day, she went about her tasks, quietly observing and gathering clues, understanding more than anyone could imagine. And as her concern grew, Clara knew that she would soon need to decide what to do with the knowledge she was amassing. Bookmark, go back. As the days passed, Clara's quiet observations turned into serious concerns. What had started as a few small inconsistencies on scattered documents was beginning to form a picture that Clara couldn't ignore. The patterns she noticed didn't just suggest simple mistakes or casual oversights. They pointed to a troubling issue in the company's finances. And if her hunch was correct, this was not just an error in reporting. It was an indicator that the company was heading for a serious financial crisis. Clara had never planned to involve herself in the company's affairs. But the deeper she looked, the more she realized she couldn't ignore what she was seeing. She was no longer just a bystander. With her background in finance, Clara understood the impact these numbers could have if the truth eventually came to light. And despite her lack of authority, she was aware that her unique position gave her access to insights others in the company were completely oblivious to. Each day, as she moved through the different offices and spaces, Clara noticed more red flags. financial reports would be left open on desks, quarterly earnings projections would be posted in meeting rooms, and private emails would sometimes be visible on computer screens left unlocked. Clara didn't need to dig or snoop. All this information was right in front of her, left out in the open by people who assumed she wasn't paying attention. One evening, Clara was cleaning the office of the chief financial officer, Marcus Gale. A binder lay open on his desk, revealing a set of figures that caught her eye. She made a quick mental note of the numbers, which didn't match with others she had previously seen. Expenses seemed disproportionately high in certain areas, and funds were being funneled into obscure accounts with vague descriptions. To most, these might have appeared as simple bookkeeping entries, but to Clara, they looked like deliberate attempts to conceal something far more serious. Clara's intuition was on high alert. In the weeks that followed, she noticed that some departments were consistently spending far beyond their budgets. At first, she thought it might be part of a growth initiative, but the numbers didn't support that theory. Instead, it looked as though these budgets were being artificially inflated. To someone who hadn't studied finance, these discrepancies might have seemed harmless or even accidental. But to Clara, they painted a picture of financial mismanagement, or worse, intentional fraud. It was becoming clear to Clara that something was deeply wrong with the company's financial practices. She couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that the executives were hiding losses or manipulating earnings to make the company appear more stable than it really was. As she observed more and more of these troubling patterns, Clara knew she had stumbled upon something far larger than she had initially thought. Still, Clara knew she couldn't act on her findings openly. She was just the cleaning lady in the eyes of the company's leaders, someone who was expected to be seen but not heard. And yet, Clara was beginning to feel a sense of responsibility. After all, she wasn't just someone passing through the company. She had been there for 15 years. She knew the employees, the managers, and even some of the executives, at least by sight. This was a place that had been a part of her life for so long, and the thought of it collapsing due to reckless management was something she couldn't simply ignore. But how could she, a mere cleaning lady, bring these issues to light without putting herself at risk? Clara felt torn. Part of her wanted to walk away, to keep her head down and let the executives deal with the mess they'd created. After all, it wasn't her responsibility. However, another part of her knew that the consequences of staying silent would likely fall on the employees, people who depended on the company for their livelihood. These were people who had nothing to do with the financial missteps being made, and they would be the ones to suffer if the company went under. Each night, after her shifts, Clara took time to reflect on what she'd uncovered. She began jotting down notes, recording each discrepancy she observed in financial reports, and summarizing suspicious conversations she overheard. Her notes grew, forming a record of everything she had seen and heard. She didn't have a plan yet, but she knew that this information was too important to ignore. If things continued on this path, the company was heading toward a disaster, and Clara's notes might be the only record of the truth. One evening, while wiping down tables near the boardroom, Clara overheard a conversation that confirmed her worst suspicions. Two senior managers were discussing the upcoming quarterly earnings report, but their voices were tense, almost panicked. One of them mentioned that the numbers were looking bad and that they would need to make adjustments to keep investors calm. Clara's heart sank as she listened. Adjustments to the numbers? She knew exactly what that meant. They planned to hide the losses, manipulate the earnings report, and make the company look more profitable than it actually was. Clara's thoughts raced as she continued cleaning, pretending not to have heard anything unusual. If they were actively planning to cover up the financial issues, then this wasn't just poor management anymore. It was deliberate deception. These executives were choosing to mislead everyone, investors, employees, and even the public, about the company's actual state. Clara realized that if this went unchecked, the company would eventually face catastrophic consequences, and hundreds of innocent employees could lose their jobs. Over the next few weeks, Clara kept a closer watch than ever. She saw certain employees working late, holding secretive meetings and reviewing documents with anxious expressions. Financial reports were being revised at the last minute, and some budgets were manipulated to hide escalating expenses. Clara overheard murmurs about off-the-books deals, partnerships that were not officially documented, and profits that seemed inflated. Each piece of information confirmed what Clara already feared. The company was being led down a dangerous path, one that could end in financial ruin. Despite everything she had discovered, Clara knew she was powerless to act openly. Speaking up would likely mean losing her job, or worse, being accused of snooping or overstepping her bounds. She was, in everyone's eyes, just a cleaning lady. And yet, Clara couldn't walk away from the truth she had uncovered. She felt a deep responsibility to the company and its employees, even though they barely noticed her presence. As Clara silently continued her rounds, she was filled with an unsettling realization. The company was on the edge of collapse, and no one seemed to see it coming. It was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. Clara, the invisible cleaning lady, might be the only one who could stop it if she could find a way to act. In the upper echelons of the company, Roy Carter was a figure both respected and feared. As CEO, he built the company from the ground up, transforming it from a modest startup into a massive corporation. Known for his cutthroat style and unyielding demands, Roy didn't tolerate mistakes. His reputation as a leader who prioritized results over relationships had kept his employees on edge, knowing that even a minor misstep could end their careers. Roy's philosophy was simple. Success wasn't merely about profit, it was about control. To him, power was everything, and his influence over the company was a source of pride. He thrived on authority and viewed the company's accomplishments as a direct reflection of his own leadership. Roy had no patience for those he deemed weak or inefficient, and he had a long track record of firing employees on the spot for small errors, often in ways that left the rest of the staff uneasy. Most employees only saw Roy during important events or when he walked through the office, his expensive shoes echoing on the polished marble floors Clara had just cleaned. He rarely spoke to anyone outside his executive team, and when he did, it was with an air of superiority that made it clear he thought he was above them. To Roy, lower-level employees, receptionists, assistants, and of course, cleaning staff like Clara were mere background figures. He considered them functional parts of his carefully crafted empire, necessary to keep things running smoothly, but ultimately replaceable. Clara had crossed paths with Roy on numerous occasions, though he barely seemed to notice her. Each time he walked by her, she could sense the disdain in his gaze. A quick flicker of judgment before he looked away as though she didn't exist. One morning, as she polished the lobby floors, Roy strode through, his usual air of authority surrounding him like an invisible armor. He glanced down at Clara, smirked, and continued on without a word. It was a fleeting moment, but one that Clara had come to expect. Roy Carter was the type of person who believed everyone had a place in his company, and Clara's in his mind was to remain unseen and unheard. It wasn't only Clara who noticed this. Roy's disregard for the lower-level employees was something of an unspoken rule within the company. His executive team had adopted his attitude, treating those below them with the same indifference. They emulated Roy's cold demeanor, creating an environment where employees in non-executive roles were rarely acknowledged or respected. Roy's focus was solely on expansion, profits, and keeping investors happy. To him, the cleaning staff, administrative assistants, and receptionists were just cogs in the machine he had built. He saw no reason to interact with them or even recognize their contributions. One evening, during an extravagant company gala, this sense of hierarchy was on full display. Junior executives and managers stood around in small groups, laughing and gossiping about the office. Champagne flowed freely, and the air was filled with the sound of jazz music. As Roy made his rounds entertaining some of the company's biggest investors, he overheard a group of young executives joking about Clara. One of them, with a dismissive laugh, remarked, "She's been here forever, and probably doesn't even dream of being anything more than a cleaning lady." The others chuckled, finding humor in the idea that Clara would remain in her role indefinitely, as though her only purpose was to clean up after them. To Roy, this was the natural order of things. and he joined in with a brief, amused chuckle. The idea of someone like Clara rising above her station seemed absurd to him. After all, in his mind, each person was right where they belonged. He didn't think twice about it, nor did he imagine that this cleaning lady would ever have the potential to impact his life or his company. As far as Roy was concerned, Clara was an invisible fixture, a simple worker who would always be there, quietly performing her duties without complaint or recognition. But what Roy couldn't have known was that Clara was far more aware than anyone gave her credit for. She had heard the jokes, the laughter, and the remarks made in passing by those who saw her as unimportant. She had observed the way they carried themselves, the way they seemed oblivious to the issues she had seen unfolding within the company. And while they laughed and dismissed her as just the cleaning lady, Clara was quietly piecing together a reality that they couldn't see. That the company's foundation was cracking, and the empire Roy Carter had built was more vulnerable than he realized. Roy's arrogance blinded him to the fact that a company's success depended on every individual, not just those in executive roles. His fixation on control and his disdain for those beneath him had left him unaware of the real problems taking root in his company. He was too focused on his own image, his power, and the profits rolling in to notice the signs of trouble. To him, the idea of a cleaning lady posing any threat or holding any significant knowledge about his company was laughable. Yet Clara, in her quiet, unassuming way, had become the person who knew more about the company's operations and its dangers than even Roy himself. Her knowledge was growing, and her understanding of the company's precarious situation was deepening with each passing day. She didn't need recognition or praise from people like Roy. Clara was content to stay in the background, but she also knew that she couldn't ignore what she'd learned. As she continued to gather information, she realized that the day might soon come when she would need to act on what she knew, whether Roy Carter acknowledged her existence or not. Clara felt increasingly uneasy about the company's financial direction. With every shift, she uncovered new hints of mismanagement, growing inconsistencies in reports, whispers of cover-ups, and the sense of secrecy among employees involved in financial matters. She had already gathered significant details, her notebook filling with precise notes on the discrepancies and questionable entries she had observed. But for all her growing knowledge, Clara still struggled with the same question. What could she, the invisible cleaning lady, actually do about it? Night after night, Clara sat in her modest apartment after her shift, flipping through the pages of her notes. She knew the company was careening toward disaster, and she also knew that staying silent could make her complicit. Hundreds of employees could lose their jobs, and the damage would extend to their families and the community. The weight of it was too much to bear. Clara realized that she had a responsibility to speak up, to at least try to prevent the downfall she saw coming. But simply telling someone wasn't an option. Who would listen? It was during one of these late-night reflections that Clara decided on her course of action. She would write an anonymous letter to Roy Carter himself. She knew it was a risk. Roy was known for his ruthlessness and his tendency to dismiss anyone who questioned his authority. But Clara believed that if she presented her findings as calmly and precisely as she could, even Roy might see the gravity of the situation. After all, his entire empire was at stake. For the next few nights, Clara carefully composed her letter. She began by outlining the major red flags she had observed: unexplained budget overflows, funds shifted to obscure accounts, and revenue projections that seemed to rely on wishful thinking rather than realistic assessments. Clara included details but was careful not to overwhelm Roy with too much information. Instead, she focused on capturing the urgency of the problem, hoping to at least catch his attention. Clara's letter wasn't just a list of numbers. She included explanations, reasons why these figures didn't make sense, and what they could imply for the future. She wanted Roy to understand that this wasn't just a minor issue that could be ignored. It was a systemic problem that would lead the company toward collapse if left unchecked. When she finished, Clara read through the letter one last time, checking for any trace that could give away her identity. This was too important to risk. If her identity were revealed, It could mean the end of her job or worse. Finally, with a steadying breath, Clara printed the letter and slipped it into an envelope. She addressed it simply, "To Roy Carter." The next day, she waited until the office was almost empty. When the coast was clear, Clara quietly walked to Roy's office, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew exactly where he kept his important documents. There was a specific spot on his desk that he checked every morning without fail. Carefully, Clara placed the envelope at the top of the stack, ensuring it would be the first thing he saw. As Clara left the office that evening, she felt a strange mix of fear and relief. For the first time, she felt like she was taking control, doing something that mattered. She knew there was a chance Roy might ignore the letter, dismiss it as nonsense, or worse, see it as an attempt to undermine him. But Clara held on to the hope that the truth in her words would be enough to break through his arrogance, to make him realize that the empire he'd built was standing on shaky ground. The following morning, Clara arrived at work with a sense of nervous anticipation. She went about her usual routine, cleaning offices and arranging supplies, but her mind was elsewhere, wondering what might be happening in Roy's office at that very moment. Was he reading the letter? Had he realized the gravity of the situation? Or had he simply tossed it aside, too confident in his own leadership to believe that anything could threaten his company? Clara forced herself to stay calm, blending into the background as she always did. She knew she couldn't afford to look nervous or out of place. After all, she was supposed to be invisible. But as the hours ticked by, she couldn't help but wonder if her anonymous warning had made any difference at all. Later that afternoon, as she was cleaning near the executive offices, Clara overheard a conversation that sparked a glimmer of hope. Roy's assistant was on the phone, speaking in a hushed, almost frantic tone. "Yes, he's furious," the assistant whispered. "Something's come up in the financials. He's called an emergency meeting with the board." Clara's heart raced. The letter had worked. Roy had seen her warning, and it had been enough to shake him. She knew this was only the beginning, that a simple letter wouldn't fix everything overnight, but she had sounded the alarm. And that was enough. Now at least, someone was taking the problem seriously. And once Roy started digging, Clara was confident that the truth would eventually come to light. As the office buzzed with tension over the next few days, Clara kept her head down, continuing to observe and quietly gathering information as she always had. She knew that she couldn't relax just yet. Roy and the executives were powerful people who would fight to protect themselves, and they wouldn't go down without a struggle. But for now, Clara had done her part. She had sounded the alarm and set the wheels in motion. Now, all she could do was wait, watching carefully and preparing for whatever might come next. In the quiet moments, as she cleaned and organized, Clara felt a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. She knew that her actions might have saved the company from a disastrous collapse, and that knowledge gave her a quiet confidence. She might not be in the spotlight, but Clara understood her own strength. She had knowledge, skills, and the courage to act on them, and she was ready to face whatever came next. The morning after Clara placed her letter on Roy Carter's desk, he walked into his office as usual, his thoughts focused on an upcoming presentation to key investors. He didn't expect anything unusual in his daily routine until he spotted the plain envelope sitting on top of his stack of papers. Frowning, Roy picked it up, his curiosity piqued. The letter was unsigned, with no indication of who had sent it. Normally, he might have discarded such a letter, dismissing it as the work of a disgruntled employee. But something about the weight of the paper and the neatness of the handwriting made him pause. As he began to read, Roy's expression shifted from mild annoyance to irritation, then quickly to disbelief. The letter detailed specific financial inconsistencies, flagging areas in the budget that had been overspent, questionable expense allocations, and revenue projections that didn't match up with previous reports. The letter outlined all of this with precision, painting a picture of a company on the verge of financial ruin. The deeper Roy read, the more uneasy he became. The tone was direct and matter-of-fact, written by someone who seemed to understand the company's finances far too well to be an outsider. Yet, it was impossible to ignore that every issue raised in the letter, aligned with some vague concerns Roy had recently noticed himself. This was no baseless accusation. Each point was supported by a level of detail that made it clear this was someone who knew exactly what they were talking about. Roy's initial reaction was anger. Anger that someone had dared to undermine him, to question his leadership. But, as he thought about the specifics in the letter, his frustration gave way to a nagging worry. For years, he had prided himself on his strong, commanding presence and his ability to spot problems before they spiraled out of control. Yet here he was, holding in his hand a letter suggesting that he had overlooked a major financial crisis brewing under his watch. For the rest of the day, Roy found himself unable to focus. The letter lingered in his mind, taunting him with its precise accusations. He began to question everything he thought he knew about the company's stability. Were his instincts failing him? Was the empire he had built on the verge of collapse, just as this letter warned? Unsettled, Roy made a decision that would have seemed uncharacteristic to those who knew him well. He ordered an internal investigation, but he did so quietly, without informing his senior executives. If there were issues within his company, he wanted to find out before anyone else caught wind of it. The investigation began immediately, and Roy waited anxiously for the results. Days passed, and with each one, his confidence dwindled. It didn't take long for the investigators to uncover irregularities, and the more they looked, the more damning evidence they found. There were discrepancies in the financial reports that went back several years. Deals that had once appeared profitable were, upon closer inspection, poorly structured, leaving the company exposed to substantial risks. And then came the most devastating discovery. Marcus Gale, the company's chief financial officer, had been secretly embezzling funds. Using complex accounting maneuvers, Marcus had been funneling company money into obscure accounts and had gone to great lengths to hide his tracks. Not only that, but he had also been inflating the company's earnings in quarterly reports to present a false image of profitability. The scale of the deceit was staggering, and Roy was left to grapple with the realization that his most trusted financial advisor had been betraying him for years. The sense of betrayal cut deep. Roy prided himself on his ability to read people and see through deception. And yet Marcus, the man he had placed his faith in, had been secretly undermining him. For a brief moment, Roy felt a swell of anger toward the anonymous author of the letter. It was their warning that had started this entire process, exposing Marcus's wrongdoing and revealing the cracks in the company's foundation. But Roy quickly pushed that anger aside. Whoever had written the letter hadn't been trying to hurt him. They had been trying to save the company from collapse. Roy wasted no time. He called Marcus into his office for a confrontation, intending to get answers. But the meeting didn't go as he had planned. Marcus tried to deflect, insisting that the findings were just misunderstandings, errors that could be explained. But the evidence was irrefutable. With a heavy heart and growing frustration, Roy knew there was only one course of action. He fired Marcus on the spot, watching as his former CFO left the building, his head held low. The investigation continued, and with each new piece of evidence, Roy felt the walls closing in. For the first time in his career, he was faced with the terrifying reality that his empire was on the brink of collapse. The sense of control and power he had always cherished was slipping away, replaced by a lingering sense of vulnerability. He was forced to confront the fact that his pride and confidence had blinded him to the real issues festering beneath the surface. As he reviewed the final report from the investigation, Roy felt a chill run down his spine. Not only had Marcus been stealing from the company, but his fraudulent financial practices had placed the entire business at risk. If the truth were to come out publicly, the company's stock would plummet, investors would flee, and legal consequences could follow. What Roy faced wasn't just a financial setback. It was a disaster that threatened to destroy everything he had built. And through it all, one question haunted him. Who had sent the letter? The investigation had turned up no clues. The writer had left no indication of their identity, no trace that could lead back to them. The letter had been a lifeline, a wake-up call that had saved his company from ruin, yet Roy had no idea who to thank. The precision of the details suggested someone who knew the financial operations intimately, but Roy couldn't pinpoint who it might be. Days turned into weeks, and Roy found himself growing increasingly obsessed with finding out who had warned him. Some executives speculated it might have been a disgruntled employee or perhaps a rival company planting doubt. But deep down, Roy knew better. This wasn't about revenge or sabotage. The letter's purpose was clear: to save the company from a ruinous collapse. As he looked out over the city's skyline one evening, Roy couldn't shake the feeling that his savior was still close by, someone who understood the stakes and acted when no one else would. It was a humbling realization for a man who had always seen himself as invincible. For all his power and authority, it had been an unseen hand that had brought him back from the brink. And though the company had taken the first steps toward recovery, Roy's search for the silent hero persisted. The anonymous whistleblower had saved his empire and perhaps even his career. But their identity remained a mystery, a reminder that someone, somewhere, had cared enough to protect his legacy when he himself had been too blind to see the danger. Roy couldn't shake the haunting question of who had saved his company. Days passed, and despite his best efforts, he found no clues as to the identity of the person who'd written the anonymous letter. The impact of the letter was undeniable. It had saved him from a disaster that would have cost him everything. Yet the author remained invisible, hidden somewhere within the ranks of his company. Then, out of the blue, he received an unusual meeting request. Clara Davies, the cleaning lady, had asked to meet with him. Roy was taken aback. It was incredibly rare for an employee from her position to request a private audience with the CEO, especially one with Clara's background in the company. As he considered her request, Roy couldn't help but feel curious. Clara had worked there for years, always quietly doing her job, never once stepping into the spotlight. But there had been something about her demeanor when she approached him, an air of quiet confidence that struck him as unusual. Intrigued, and perhaps even a little puzzled, Roy agreed to the meeting. That evening, after the office had quieted down and the building had mostly emptied, Clara walked into Roy's expansive office. She moved with a calmness that was surprising. She wasn't intimidated by the grandeur of the room, nor by the towering presence of the CEO himself. Instead, she seemed collected, as though she knew exactly why she was there. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me, Mr. Carter," Clara began, her voice steady as she took a seat across from his desk. She held a small folder in her hands, and as she sat down, she placed it on the desk between them. Roy leaned forward, his curiosity growing. He had no idea what to expect, but he sensed that this conversation would be unlike any other he'd had before. "What can I do for you, Clara?" he asked, his tone carefully neutral. Although he was usually dismissive of lower-level employees, something in her gaze suggested this wasn't an ordinary interaction. She didn't hesitate or seem nervous. In fact, she appeared completely in control. Roy couldn't help but feel a strange respect for her composure. Clara wasted no time. She reached forward, opened the folder, and revealed a stack of neatly organized documents, financial reports, transaction histories, and notes that Roy immediately recognized as critical to the investigation. His eyes widened as he flipped through the pages, realizing that these documents contained even more detailed information than his investigators had uncovered. They pinpointed discrepancies, outlined missing funds, and traced questionable transactions, all the issues that had nearly brought the company to ruin. "I've been watching for a long time," Clara said, carefully observing Roy's reaction. "At first, I thought it was just a mistake, but the patterns kept repeating, and it was clear that something was wrong." Roy's hands froze over the papers as he tried to process what was happening. He looked up, staring at Clara in disbelief. You knew about this?" he stammered, still reeling from the shock. Clara nodded, her expression calm. "Yes, I used to work as a financial analyst before I took this job. Circumstances changed, but I never lost my ability to read numbers and spot patterns. When I saw the irregularities in your financial reports, I knew I had to do something. I started gathering evidence, taking notes, and everything I could find. And when I realized how serious the situation was, I wrote you that anonymous letter." For a moment, Roy was at a loss for words. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. The anonymous letter, the one that had saved the company from collapse, had come from Clara, the cleaning lady he'd barely acknowledged all these years. Roy felt as if the room had shifted, the balance of power tilting in an entirely unexpected way. He realized, perhaps for the first time in his career, that he had been completely blindsided by his own arrogance. He'd spent years building a fortress of power around himself, never considering that someone like Clara, someone he'd overlooked entirely, could possess the knowledge and foresight to save his company. Clara continued, her voice steady but firm. "I didn't come here to threaten you or demand anything, Mr. Carter. But I believe we can help each other. You're in a difficult position, and I have information that could assist you in stabilizing the company before things get worse." Roy's mind raced as he tried to process her words. Here was Clara, the invisible cleaning lady, now offering him a solution, a way to turn the company around. But with her offer came an unexpected request. Clara wasn't just offering information, she was asking for an opportunity. She wanted a role that reflected her abilities, something far beyond her current position. "What is it that you want, Clara?" Roy asked, his voice rough with a mix of disbelief and admiration. Clara met his gaze, a hint of determination in her eyes. "I'm not asking for much. I want a position where I can actually use my skills. I've shown that I understand the numbers, the risks, and the company's weaknesses. All I'm asking for is a chance to help you rebuild this company from the inside." Roy stared at her, his mind whirling. The woman sitting across from him was not the person he had imagined. She wasn't just the cleaning lady. She was someone with the intelligence, insight, and courage to expose a scandal that could have destroyed everything he had built. And now, she was offering him a path to redemption, a chance to correct the mistakes that had nearly cost him his empire. After a long pause, Roy leaned back, rubbing his temples as he tried to gather his thoughts. "If what you're saying is true," he said slowly, "and you've already helped save this company from the brink, then maybe it's time I start seeing people for who they are, not just the positions they hold." Clara nodded, understanding the significance of his words. "That's all I ask, Mr. Carter. Give me a chance, and I'll help you rebuild this company. I know I can make a difference." For the first time in his career, Roy felt humbled. He extended his hand, and Clara took it, sealing an unexpected alliance. The power dynamics in the room shifted again, but this time it was based on mutual respect. Clara, who had been invisible for so many years, was now at the center of the company's recovery. And as she left the office that night, she knew that everything was about to change for both of them. Bookmark. Clara's transition into her new role within the company was anything but easy. Though she now had a position in the financial department, the initial reaction from the executives and employees was skeptical at best. After all, to them, Clara had been just the cleaning lady for years, and it was difficult for many to see her as anything more than that. Some doubted her abilities, others whispered in corners, and a few even seemed resentful. But Clara was no stranger to challenges. She met their skepticism with quiet determination, intent on proving herself through hard work and results. With her extensive knowledge of finance and her eye for detail, Clara quickly became a crucial player in the company's recovery. She delved into the accounts, analyzing each financial decision with a critical perspective, correcting past errors, and identifying areas where funds had been mismanaged. Her approach was precise and thorough, and gradually even the most resistant executives began to see the positive impact she was having. Clara's insight went beyond simply balancing numbers. She offered strategic advice, identifying opportunities for cost savings and growth, areas where the company had previously been bleeding money. One of the first major changes Clara implemented was creating a culture of transparency. She believed that the secrecy and hierarchy that Roy and his executives had fostered had allowed the company's financial issues to remain hidden. To counter this, Clara organized regular meetings open to employees at all levels, encouraging them to ask questions and voice their concerns. She wanted everyone to understand the financial health of the company and to feel like they had a role in its recovery. Clara's approach was new and unfamiliar, but it was exactly what the company needed. For the first time, employees felt like they were part of the solution, and morale began to improve. In addition to these meetings, Clara organized workshops focused on ethics and accountability. She saw firsthand how the lack of these values had contributed to the financial disaster, and she was determined to change it. During these workshops, Clara shared her own story, her journey from financial analyst to cleaning staff, and now back to a role where she could use her skills to make a difference. Her story resonated with many, especially those who had experienced setbacks or felt underestimated. By being open about her own experiences, Clara encouraged others to step forward with ideas, concerns, and suggestions. Clara also launched a mentorship program to support underprivileged employees. She understood better than anyone what it felt like to be overlooked and underestimated based on job title or background. Through the mentorship program, Clara offered guidance to younger employees, providing them with the tools to succeed and helping them navigate the challenges of the corporate world. She shared practical advice as well as lessons she had learned the hard way, reminding them that their contributions mattered, regardless of their position. These initiatives didn't just create a positive impact on the company's culture. They began to transform the way employees viewed each other. Where there had once been a sense of division between levels, now there was a spirit of collaboration. The executives who had once dismissed Clara as a cleaning lady now attended her workshops and sought her input on important decisions. They realized that Clara's approach was exactly what the company needed, and as they embraced her vision, the company's recovery accelerated. Under Clara's influence, the company began to regain stability. Sales increased, clients regained confidence in the brand, and employee turnover decreased as morale improved. For the first time in years, the company was beginning to thrive again. Clara's influence wasn't limited to spreadsheets and budgets. Her impact was felt in the way employees engaged with each other, the way they shared ideas, and the way they treated one another. Her leadership style was unlike anything the company had seen, and it sparked a renewed sense of purpose among the staff. The board of directors, who had initially been hesitant about Clara's unconventional rise, soon became her strongest supporters. They recognized her ability to see beyond numbers and focus on the human side of business. Clara understood the importance of nurturing relationships, both within the company and with clients, and her efforts to build a culture of respect and transparency resonated deeply with them. The board saw Clara as a symbol of resilience and innovation, and they publicly commended her contributions to the company's turnaround. As the company's reputation began to rebuild, Clara's story reached beyond the walls of the office. She was invited to speak at industry conferences, where she shared her insights on resilience, diversity, and her journey. Standing on stage in front of hundreds, Clara spoke not only of her accomplishments but of the hardships she had faced and the strength she'd discovered within herself. She emphasized that success wasn't defined by titles or status, but by the impact one had on others. Her story inspired many, reminding them to believe in their potential, regardless of where they started. Despite her newfound recognition, Clara remained humble. She often thought back to her days spent cleaning offices, the laughter and dismissive looks from executives who never imagined she would one day hold a position of influence. Clara harbored no resentment, though. Instead, she focused on gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons she'd learned, for the opportunities she had been given, and for the people who had supported her along the way. Her efforts didn't go unnoticed, and the company soon received accolades for its remarkable turnaround. Clara was recognized as a leader in the industry, a role model who had defied the odds and redefined what it meant to lead. The media took interest in her story, and interview requests poured in. Still, Clara remained grounded, using her newfound platform to advocate for underrepresented voices in the corporate world. She became a champion for diversity and inclusion, stressing the importance of recognizing the potential in people from all backgrounds and roles. In every interview, Clara emphasized that real success wasn't measured by wealth or status, but by the ability to lift others up, to create an environment where people felt valued and respected. Her message resonated widely, and she became an example of how one person's courage to act on their values could spark change in an entire organization. Over time, Clara's leadership transformed the company into a beacon of resilience and accountability. What had once been an empire built on a single man's vision became a community built on shared values and trust. Clara's approach had reshaped not only the company's finances, but its soul. The corporation was no longer just a business. It had become a responsible entity, respected not only for its success but for its commitment to people and principles. Though Clara's journey had been challenging, it had led her to a place where she could make a real difference. She remained a constant presence in the company, always accessible to employees from all departments. She listened to their stories, encouraged them to pursue their aspirations, and reminded them of their own value. For Clara, leadership was never about authority. It was about empowering others. Through hard work, resilience, and a strong sense of purpose, Clara had not only saved the company, but created a legacy that would endure for years to come. Clara's success within the company had a ripple effect far beyond the walls of the corporate headquarters. The transformation she brought about inspired employees and reinvigorated the workplace culture. But her influence didn't stop there. Clara understood that the values she was working to instill within the company could also benefit the wider community. And with her new position and platform, she began to pursue ways to give back. In addition to her work at the company, Clara dedicated her time to volunteering in local organizations, especially those focused on job training and support for underserved communities. Drawing from her own experiences, Clara had a deep understanding of how hard it could be to break out of a cycle of low-paying jobs and limited opportunities. She worked tirelessly to help individuals who had been overlooked, just as she once had been, providing mentorship and resources to those eager to build a better future for themselves. One of Clara's most impactful initiatives was creating a scholarship fund for adults seeking to re-enter the workforce or pursue additional training. The Clara Davies Scholarship focused on individuals with backgrounds in fields that often went underappreciated, like maintenance, administration, and other support roles. She wanted to ensure that people who might have otherwise been overlooked would have a chance to enhance their skills and reach their potential, regardless of where they had started. The scholarship fund gained momentum quickly, with executives and board members from her company, inspired by Clara's story, making contributions. Soon, the fund was large enough to support dozens of scholarships each year, allowing recipients to attend training programs, certification courses, and even degree programs. Clara's goal was to break down the barriers that held talented people back, and to demonstrate that everyone deserved an opportunity to grow. Clara's mentorship program within the company had been just the beginning of her vision for encouraging professional development. Inspired by the support she received from employees who had initially doubted her, she expanded her mentorship model into the community. She collaborated with local nonprofits and career development organizations, holding workshops and offering free consultations for individuals preparing to enter the job market. These sessions covered everything from financial literacy and interview techniques to tips on developing confidence in professional environments. Clara used her own story as an example, encouraging attendees to believe in themselves, regardless of where they started. Clara's story began to attract attention from beyond the local community. Journalists wrote about her journey from cleaning staff to a senior financial advisor, and her story resonated across the country. She was invited to speak at conferences, participate in panel discussions, and even conduct seminars at universities, where she shared her experiences and the lessons she had learned along the way. At these events, Clara emphasized the importance of resilience, self-worth, and the courage to speak up, even when no one seems to be listening. One of her most memorable speaking engagements was at a conference on diversity and inclusion, where Clara shared insights on how companies could better recognize and nurture talent from all levels. Her words were met with thunderous applause, and her story inspired countless individuals to take a closer look at the culture within their own workplaces. Clara's message was clear. Every person, regardless of their position, contributes to a company's success. recognizing that potential and investing in people was the true path to building a successful, inclusive, and resilient organization. Meanwhile, Clara's success story had an undeniable effect on the company's public image. What had once been an organization with a reputation for ruthless ambition was now seen as a company that valued its employees and prioritized ethical practices. Clara's presence became a symbol of the company's new values, a reminder of its commitment to transparency and fairness. Clients who had once doubted the company's integrity returned, reassured by the changes Clara had brought about. The company's reputation as a responsible and people-focused organization attracted new business and strengthened its relationship with long-term partners. With time, Clara's family, who had supported her through the toughest moments of her life, also benefited from her success. Her children, now grown, admired their mother for her perseverance and integrity, seeing her not just as a parent but as a role model. They were inspired by the way Clara had transformed her own life and were motivated to pursue their own dreams with the same resilience and dedication. The family often gathered together to celebrate the milestones in Clara's journey, sharing stories of the challenges she had overcome and the incredible impact she had made. Clara's influence continued to grow, and she found herself increasingly sought after as a voice for change within the industry. She leveraged this platform to advocate for policies that supported fair wages, transparent hiring practices, and equal opportunities. Clara knew firsthand how much untapped potential existed among people who were often overlooked, and she wanted to ensure that future generations had the support and opportunities they needed to succeed. Despite the praise and recognition, Clara remained grounded. She frequently reflected on her journey, from her days as an analyst to her years cleaning offices, and the unexpected path that had led her to become a leader. Clara's success hadn't come easily, but each challenge had taught her the value of resilience, empathy, and the importance of standing up for what she believed in. She carried these lessons with her into every project she undertook, every speech she gave, and every life she touched. As the months turned into years, Clara's impact on the company and the community became undeniable. The organization thrived under the culture of respect and inclusion she had fostered. Employees no longer felt divided by titles or roles. Instead, they saw themselves as members of a collaborative, supportive community. And as Clara's efforts extended into the broader community, more people were given the chance to realize their own potential, thanks to her scholarship fund and mentorship programs. Clara's story was no longer just about her personal success. It was a legacy of hope, resilience, and empowerment. She had demonstrated that true leadership wasn't about authority, but about making a difference, lifting others up, and creating a positive impact. Clara's journey served as a reminder that anyone, regardless of their position or background, could make a meaningful change. As the company continued to flourish, Clara remained a steady presence. She still took time to connect with employees, to listen to their stories, and to encourage them in their own aspirations. To her, leadership was a responsibility, not a title, and she was committed to fostering a culture of support and empowerment. In the end, Clara's life became a testament to the power of courage, compassion, and integrity. Through her actions, she had changed the lives of countless individuals, both within the company and beyond. And as she looked back on the journey she had traveled, Clara knew that every step, every challenge, and every moment of doubt had been worth it. She had proven, not only to herself but to everyone who had once dismissed her, that greatness could come from the most unexpected places. Bookmark. Years had passed since Clara Davies first stepped out of the shadows and took her place at the forefront of the company. Under her influence, the organization had transformed into a model of resilience, transparency, and inclusion. Employees across every department felt a renewed sense of pride in their work and in the company's mission, which now focused as much on people as on profit. Clara's leadership style had taken root, inspiring others to approach their roles with empathy and integrity, regardless of their title or responsibilities. The story of Clara's journey, from cleaning lady to a respected leader, became widely known, both inside and outside the company. Her colleagues, once indifferent to her presence, now viewed her as a source of wisdom and guidance. To them, Clara was more than just an executive. She was a role model whose story served as a reminder of what true leadership could achieve. Her approach to leadership didn't rely on hierarchy or authority. Instead, she prioritized fostering trust, open communication, and a sense of belonging within the company. As her influence spread, Clara never lost sight of the lessons she had learned along the way. She continued her community work, investing in projects that supported people who, like herself, had been underestimated or overlooked. She advocated for job programs that helped those with challenging backgrounds find meaningful employment, and collaborated with local colleges to develop courses that taught essential skills in finance and business management. Through these initiatives, Clara provided others with the tools to change their lives, much as she had changed her own. One of Clara's proudest achievements was a partnership she established with a network of local businesses to create a leadership training program for women and minority employees. She had seen firsthand how people from diverse backgrounds were often overlooked for promotions or leadership roles. Her training program provided mentorship, skills-building workshops, and access to a supportive community of professionals. Over time, the program produced many successful leaders who credited Clara's vision and encouragement for their achievements. For Clara, watching these individuals flourish in their careers was one of the most fulfilling aspects of her work. The company, too, benefited immensely from the culture Clara had worked so hard to build. Employee satisfaction was at an all-time high, productivity soared, and turnover dropped significantly. Clients and partners respected the company's commitment to ethical practices, and the organization's reputation as a people-centered business attracted talented professionals from all corners. The business community often looked to Clara and her company as an example of what corporate responsibility could look like in the modern world. Her contributions did not go unrecognized. Clara was honored with numerous awards for her work in business and community development. She was frequently invited to speak at major industry conferences, where she shared her experiences and urged companies to rethink their values and prioritize people as much as profits. Clara's speeches were powerful, infused with the hard-won wisdom of someone who had faced immense challenges and emerged stronger. She reminded her audiences that leadership wasn't about being at the top, it was about lifting others up along the way. Despite all the recognition, Clara remained grounded. She never saw herself as a hero or an icon. For her, this journey was about making a meaningful impact, about ensuring that no one felt as invisible as she once had. She often returned to her early days in the company in her thoughts, remembering the feelings of isolation and invisibility. These memories drove her to create spaces where everyone felt valued, regardless of their position. Clara wanted every person in the organization to know that they mattered, that their work made a difference. Clara's family, especially her children, watched her journey with pride. They admired her strength, resilience, and humility, often telling her that she had shown them what true perseverance looked like. Together, they celebrated her milestones, reflecting on how far she had come and the struggles she had overcome. Clara's children, now pursuing careers of their own, carried her legacy of integrity and empathy into their own professional lives. To them, Clara wasn't just a successful businesswoman. She was a source of unwavering inspiration. In her free time, Clara continued to volunteer with local charities and job training programs. She believed in giving back to the community that had supported her through her own challenges, and she remained deeply committed to helping others realize their potential. Whether she was mentoring young professionals, organizing workshops, or simply listening to people's stories, Clara always approached each interaction with compassion and a willingness to help. Her humble presence was a reminder that true leadership was about serving others. As the years passed, Clara became a cherished figure in the company, known for her kindness, strength, and vision. Employees from all levels and departments sought her advice, knowing that she would always listen with an open heart and offer guidance without judgment. Clara's journey had come full circle. The cleaning lady who had once been overlooked was now the guiding force behind a company that valued every voice. Under her influence, the company became a symbol of hope and resilience, known as much for its commitment to ethical practices As for its financial success, Clara had helped create an environment where employees felt valued, clients felt respected, and partners felt proud to be associated with the brand. The organization had become more than just a company. It was a community where every individual had the chance to succeed, thanks in large part to Clara's leadership. Looking back on her life, Clara knew that each hardship had shaped her into the person she was today. The challenges she had faced, the moments of doubt and struggle, had all contributed to her growth and resilience. Her journey had taught her that real success wasn't measured by titles or accolades, but by the impact one had on others. Clara had changed not only the course of her own life, but the lives of countless others who had been inspired by her story. As she prepared to retire, Clara knew that her legacy would live on. The company she had helped transform would continue to thrive under the culture of respect and empowerment she had instilled. Her impact would be felt for generations, as the employees she had mentored passed on her lessons to the next wave of leaders. Clara had proven that greatness could come from the most unexpected places, and that true leadership was about creating a positive, lasting difference in the lives of others. In her final speech to the company, Clara addressed a room filled with employees, board members, and partners, each of whom had been touched by her journey. "If I leave you with one lesson," she said, her voice steady but full of emotion, "let it be this: never underestimate the power of integrity, and never overlook the potential in those around you. Success is not about where you start. It's about the impact you have on those who walk beside you." As the audience rose in applause, Clara felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had achieved more than she had ever dreamed possible, and as she looked out at the faces of her colleagues, friends, and family, she knew that her legacy of hope, empowerment, and resilience would carry on. With that, Clara stepped away from the podium, her journey complete, but her influence everlasting. Clara Davies' journey is a powerful reminder of the incredible potential that exists in each of us, no matter where we start. Her story teaches us that success isn't solely about position or title, but rather the courage to recognize our own value and take bold action, even when the odds are stacked against us. Clara's journey from a dismissed cleaning lady to a respected leader highlights the importance of humility, empathy, and a commitment to integrity. She transformed not only her life, but the lives of countless others, showing that true leadership lies in the ability to lift others up and create lasting change. In a world that often overlooks people based on status or role, Clara's story challenges us to rethink what makes someone valuable. Her legacy shows us that strength can emerge from the quietest voices, and greatness can come from the most unexpected places. The lesson here is one of empowerment, to believe in ourselves, to persist in the face of adversity, and to see the potential in everyone, regardless of their title or background. If you found Clara's story inspiring, please comment 1 below. If it resonated deeply with you, comment 2. And we'd love to hear about your own experiences or stories of resilience and determination. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss out on more inspiring stories. Share your thoughts about this journey in the comments below. We look forward to hearing from you.